Hi, it's Eiley. Welcome to episode 2 of Pure Light. Today's show is about fear of judgment. So if you have ever had the thought, but what will people think? This is for you. My goal by the end of this episode is to share a new way of looking at that fear so that instead of letting it stop you, you can still do what you truly want to do, because that's ultimately what that fear gets in the way of. So I recently had coffee and lunch with two very different friends from very different worlds. One of them is in the corporate world, and one of them is like a yogi and a healer. And it struck me that they were both scared of doing what they wanted to do in their businesses because of the fear that people may not like them. So they were both talking about how they felt like they couldn't do what they wanted because of this fear of what people would think. And I mean, I can certainly relate to that. It's something that's always been there for me at some level. And I think it goes back as far as high school, at least, that I can remember. I remember having a conversation with my sister when we were both in high school. So this is over 20 years ago now. And I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember saying to her, well, I can't do that because what'll people think? And she just kind of shrugged and was like, whatever, like it'll be fine. And I remember looking at her like, how are we even related? Because for me, that was such a huge deal. And for her, it really wasn't. And so it's kind of funny. I think that some people have this, some people don't. And we grew up in the same house, my sister and I. We had the same parents. So I don't think this is a learned thing. I think this is like a karmic thing. Maybe this is something that my soul needs to work through in this lifetime. And I mean, there's certainly been instances since then as well where I've been concerned about what people might think. I remember when I was in the corporate world, there was a lot of that, I think, just because of the political nature of being in a very competitive industry. But also, I remember when I wanted to take a leave of absence to reevaluate my life, I was scared of asking for that time off because I was worried that if I went back, people might think it was irresponsible of me to take that time off. And I thought it would ruin my career. And anyway, I didn't end up going back, but I don't think it would have ruined my career. They were very happy to welcome me back at the end of the leave when I told them that I was leaving. And more recently, when I started teaching Kundalini yoga, I remember also being very worried about what people might think. Because the first time I tried Kundalini, I was just like, this is so weird. And I know other people are going to have that reaction to it as well. It's not the most common kind of yoga, and it's got a lot of stuff in it that's quite different. And so I knew I would be teaching and other people would potentially have this reaction of kind of like, what is this? And that definitely made it scary for me to start teaching. But I did it anyway, again, because I think, well, for me, I think part of life is learning to be the fullest expression of yourself. And so I know that that's the right choice for me. But I guess depending on circumstances, depending on what's going on, it may or may not be. But anyway, I'll share a tool with you that you can use to consider whether or not it's the right choice for you to do what's true to you. So I looked power up on dictionary.com, and power is ultimately your ability to do or act. And so if you think about power in terms of this fear of what people will think, when you are worried about what other people will think, it's ultimately a way of giving them your power. And you can think about this in terms of a pie chart or even a pie if you don't like math. So let's say that the pie or pie chart represents the amount of power or decision-making authority you have in your own life. So what ends up happening when you're worried about what other people might think is that you are giving them a piece of that pie. So you're giving them potentially like a little sliver or like a normal piece or a big piece or 50% or even potentially 100%. Like if there's something that you want to do and then you don't do it because of the fear of what people might think. So for example, if I decided that I'm not going to ask for that leave of absence, many years ago, if I had made that decision, then I would have basically been giving my pie to these other people whose opinions I was worried about, who had no idea that I was even giving them this pie, which is kind of crazy. It's a little insane if you think about the amount of decision-making authority that you give to other people when you're worried about their opinions, because their opinions may not even be whatever you think they might be. And to be honest, they're probably not even focused on their opinion of you, because they're probably worried about the same thing for themselves. They're probably worried about, like, what are people going to think of me if I do what I want to do? So I think the pie or pie chart is a way that you can think about this whenever this fear comes up for you. Like, how much decision-making authority do I want to give to other people? Do I want to keep it all for myself? Or is this a situation that somehow warrants that other people get a piece of that pie? And it's a good thing to consider, because when we don't look at it that way, I think it's really easy for us to make unconscious choices. There are a ton of quotes about being true to yourself. And I think that the desire to conform comes from this worry of what other people might think. So when we worry about what other people might think, that's when we're conforming to other people's expectations. That's when we're conforming to society's expectations and trying to be normal, and ultimately becoming a lesser version of ourselves in the process. So it's really important to be aware of how we're making our decisions and who we're giving the power to. Like, are we keeping it for ourselves, or are we giving it to other people? Anyway, I'll include a bunch of those quotes about being yourself in the podcast notes. You can find them at purelightpodcast.com. Look for episode 2. I also wrote an article recently about why Kundalini yoga can be weird for beginners. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And for now, I'll leave you with this. The next time that you are worried about what people might think about the pie. Think about, how much pie does this person or do these people deserve to have for this decision in my life? It's worth thinking about. Thanks for listening, and until next time, may you be guided by your light.